Hello, all you amazing beings out there. We are MindFeelz, and today we are going to talk about trust.
Well, I wanted to talk about trust, but I think she wants to talk about
it too.
But I'll help. So last week we were piggybacking off of letting go in relationships, and it got me thinking about what is on the opposite side of letting go. And we did talk about that in that session, but we talk about it a lot. We talk about having trust or having faith or kind of surrendering to those powers that be. And I started to think about, like, what does that actually look like? How does that feel in our lives? How do we make that seem less like this sort of fantasy, woo-woo sort of spiritual thing, like just have faith, and really like put it into our lives, and how do we operate in a place of trust, and how do we help others get to that place of trust? So really kind of breaking it down in the best way we can. And I want to start to talk about where trust kind of begins to get instilled into us to start. So I think for me, trust has been kind of had multiple applications. So when I was a child, I think trust was about the people that I was around. It was about the people I looked up to, and being able to feel this security and this availability to the people that took care of me and that showed me love and care. And I think that's where maybe my first ideas of trust were and began to build. I did grow up in, at the very beginning, a Catholic household, so there was a little bit of information. I did pray as a child. I remember that. I did already start to build some sort of spirituality at a young age, so there was also that kind of trust, and like I was already being taught to really trust in prayer and the ability to be able to speak to things that aren't necessarily there, and really trust in this other world. And then as I grew older, I think there were stages where trust seemed to kind of waver, and life didn't always give me what I thought was coming at me, and there was pain, and there was suffering, there was frustrations, even by the people around me and friends or family members or things like that. And I think on that level, there were places where trust maybe was broken, and I noticed that that security and that availability was sometimes shut out, and I would be maybe scared or feel not as stable, and I would notice that trust might be waver there. And then as I grew older and I think moved out and was on my own, I started to develop my own ability to trust others, right? So like looking at others and being like, oh, do I trust that person? And I would look at behaviors in that person maybe that represent either people that I have trusted or have not trusted. So there was that. And then I still had that other operating system about trust, where there was a more metaphysical sort of trust developing as I grew older, in my abilities to understand how to move on after like a harsh event happened, and how to move past those things, still with cultivating a good attitude and moving in that direction. So I'm kind of opening the floor with this like two separate ideas of trust, because we talk about trust with the same word, but I think we're talking sometimes about two different worlds things. And I want to talk about how maybe those come together, and maybe how they also are separate, and then we can really define what trust is through that. So
and I think, a lot of things, but I just
you think?
Yeah, I was paying really good attention while you were speaking. and I think it's important, and I noticed the first thing you bring up is where trust comes from is from other people and those interactions that we have, and then it almost, as we mature and develop in wisdom and experience, we get a sense of trust that is is more, like you said, metaphysical, or in a sense of self, in a sense of connection to a higher power, or whatever source of energy we believe in, or things we see in nature and the universe, and that aren't necessarily byproducts of our direct interactions with others. And then there's this idea of you learn trust from your human interaction and those specific relationships. People show you trustworthy or not trustworthy. So when you're in a relationship setting or those interactions, it is almost like this whole separate animal. Trust in that respect seems to be conditional in a way, versus the trust that you have in your own spirit and your own, your higher power, or the energy, the universe, whatever things you identify with and believe and motivate you in that way. The trust there it can't be conditional, because then you really lose your ability to have peace and your ability to enjoy your life. So I think it's important to understand and kind of like figure out and dissect this concept of how we blanket this thing with trust, but we also exercise it in such different ways. And in relationships with other people, they can do things that make or break, or earn or lose, or it's almost like a property that you earn or you attain, and then you can also destroy it or lose it, or whatever can happen there. And how we learn how to trust based off of those interactions of trustworthy or untrustworthy people in our lives, how we kind of like become conditioned in those ways. But ultimately, I think that even when we have situations where we've been treated in an untrustworthy way, there is something transcending above that, where you bring yourself above that and you learn how to trust regardless of other people's actions, where your trust is in something more than a person, it's in more than choices. It's in a sense of believing that your life has intention and purpose, and that if you put your energy and your effort and your focus into that as often as possible, and even when you have a bad day, you wake up the next one and you put your focus and your intention back into that purpose of your life, there's a trust that your purpose will be fulfilled. And that is something that transcends even your relationships where you might have something painful happening. Mm-hmm. You can get through those times and that adversity where those human interactions of trust have failed you, and you can lean on the trust that doesn't fail you, which is that in your higher power or yourself, or the universe in a way.
So that is, I think, cultivated in a sense.
How do you get that? Yeah.
I think
when, how?
Yeah. So
tell me. It sounds great.
I'll take it. You remember to be happy and joyful and compassionate all the time.
Sounds perfect.
Well, maybe not, but you're always going to be working at it, and that's the point.
You trust that you will get there eventually. If you work towards it, you will get there. It's almost like that law of a lot of people are interested in how to manifest their goals and their dreams, and what do I put out there? What do I say I want? And how does that lead me to actually getting those things? Because you put that energy into it, knowing that something's going to take care of. There's an equal exchange, a balance.
Absolutely. And I think what I was saying about cultivating it has to do with really sitting down with ourselves in the moment as we're moving through life, and kind of accepting life as it is, accepting ups and downs, accepting people as they are, accepting how the world is going to come at you, surrendering to all of that. Mm-hmm. And there in that space is where that trust comes. So when I say it's cultivated, it's because as stuff then comes at you that may seem frightening or may push those boundaries of comfort, that underlying trust is what allows you to stay moving through that stuff in a graceful way and cultivate it, because it doesn't always come natural. Life is turbulent, and I think as we're learning, that cultivation comes as that turbulence erupts. So we're consistently like feeling this, okay, just because we have trust doesn't mean we're not going to feel something from the world that makes us move or feels anxiety or excitement or fear or however it comes at us. It just means that we're able to see it, set it to the side, and observe it, and then kind of move through it as it comes. So I think trust, in a sense, feels that way. How would you say trust feels to you?
I think it's almost like a lens you develop, and like you're talking about, you cultivate it through the difficulties, and you let those experiences teach you how to really get in touch with that part of yourself that can let go and release and accept and kind of like move with ease through the challenges. And it's a lens, it's a practice of mindset, and it's a feeling of ease even in times where you shouldn't feel at ease, or like it's not your first reaction to feel that way. But there's almost, for me, I've started to get to a point where I've developed like such an understanding and this trust that I want good things in life. I want to put good things into the world. I want to influence others in a positive way, and I'm open to growing and shaping myself however much I need to, to do that. Then I look at these experiences where there's hardship, and when I get past the initial shock or emotional response, I can come to a place where I'm like, okay, this thing is happening, it's shaping me, it's my teacher right now. So I'm going to trust that through this experience, I will come out into more of the person that I need to be to fulfill my goals and to fulfill my purpose and to better serve and influence others and myself in my life. And it's putting a positive expectation on all circumstances, even if the circumstances are really difficult.
That makes sense.
And it's not, I know that it's like, Pollyanna way of living, but the reality is your life is your own experience. So if you decide how you see your experience, you can create a happy life just by saying, my life is happy. It does.
And wait, I think it's positive is like, positive doesn't mean it has to be
doesn't mean everything's
overly excited
well all the time,
because I don't think that's necessarily the emotion either, but it's more of that consistent, joyful, sort of graceful emotion, and that's a cultivated emotion.
Understanding that the days that maybe aren't full of that level of excitement and energy have their purpose in your life. And I have days where I'm like droopy, and I have an understanding of there's a trust in the process that is just a process of who I am. Whatever I need to experience right now, whatever's going on is affecting me, and that's okay, and that's part of my experience.
So I'll share a little bit of where I'm at in my life in terms of trust. Where I notice is I have a general pattern of disruption in my life, where the disruption comes in, whether it be something financial that's kind of frazzled me, or I take on too much, or I all of a sudden start to look at like all of my to-do list instead of one by one, and all of a sudden I feel this anxiety, or I feel weight of family, or I feel like I am having a hard time communicating with a friend, or something like that comes in. And the general pattern for me is to freak out. Like to feel like, oh, this is it. Like I'm going in and then I'm going to attach to something, and I'm going to start to dramatize it, or like get like in there, and I want to, like, my general pattern is to create some drama, and there's fear in that drama. Like I feel scared that someone is trying to corrupt where I'm at, or that this is too much for me to handle, or something like that. And where I'm seeing that trust now and why I feel like it needs to be talked about is because I see it as a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
So although it sounds like this, have faith in life and these sorts of things, it's not that, because once I start to practice it, it's like it comes with real life information on the other end.
Yeah.
So what's happening is I wait it out. I move through that turbulence with this sense of peace, even if it's a little, it's a little tough to get there. But I just keep remembering, on the other end of this, it's okay. Like,
it'll pass.
My job right now is just to stay calm.
Mm-hmm.
Like, my job is just to stay calm. That doesn't necessarily mean I have to, react perfectly. Sometimes it means I need to like lay down or like sit in my room, or I have to step away from the situation I'm at, but I've got to stay calm. And then once I get through that, it might be the next day, it might be 5 hours later, it might be 2 days later, but there is this like really wonderful sense of, whew, like
I made it.
And not only did I make it, but if I would have engaged with stuff, who knows how long that would have taken me.
I didn't carry it with me. I learned something. I showed myself I could do it, and that is something too for me. Like to share personally, have dealt with panic attacks and anxiety attacks, and from different. I have PTSD from different situations where I get very like quick adrenal responses. So it's a very physical thing that's happening, and in the moment there are times when your body's gonna have to just go through the physical response that it's gonna have. And there's I lean into it sometimes too much, and then it just takes longer to get through it, and then other times I can reassure myself and have that sense of trust and understanding that if I wait this out, I will make it out on the other side. I can get through this and past this. I just need to, breathe and give myself the grace or the time that I need to do it. And then when you make it through, it's like a sense of accomplishment for me. Personally, I feel like, wow, I showed myself I can do it. So then the next time when I feel that same response start to happen, I can call on the time before when I did a good job and be like, okay, remember that if I just wait this out, I know from experience that it will work. And I think trying things out and seeing how things work is a good idea. We should really, in order to really learn trust, you have to take chances. You have to risk the unknown, because that's what it's all about, is understanding that even without knowing all of the information, you can still put a positive expectation on things for yourself.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that's very true. And I think we had a little powwow before this talk today. We talked about all paths kind of leading to the same way. You had brought up something biblical, and I think I talked a little bit about Paulo Coelho, and we were talking about how like the nice thing is, even if you do engage with the drama, the wonderful thing about this trust and having this sense of knowing and that positive expectation on things is that, it's okay if you do end up engaging and it shoots you on a 1 month, or you shift your whole life and it takes a year to get back to where you feel like you're back on that path, is that all these paths do lead to the same place. And that is another aspect of trust that I think is really important, because we're not always gonna get it right. We're not always, that's that practice. It's taken me a while to get where I'm at. And I mean, the dramatic journey that I have placed myself on to get here today is like, a story in itself. And it's beautiful now in retrospect, but I can definitely see where I made big detours, because I wasn't in that place of trust, and I did feel fear and anxiety and pain and suffering. And because I was projecting that outward, because I was feeling that, and because I got into that space, then everything around me also engaged with that space, and that vibration then just went outward, and then it was a self-fulfilling prophecy until I was able to get myself back into that place where I transcended whatever that emotional state I was in. And now I can see it's all in here. It's always in here. And then maybe we can bring it back around to then trusting people.
Yeah.
Maybe
I was gonna say.
maybe that that trust can be given to people too. Maybe there doesn't have to be earned, and it doesn't have to be taken away from people when they show us differently, because they're just going through the same thing as I just explained about myself. So
I think putting the emphasis on the unconditional trust that you learn for yourself, you carry it into everything. And so even though it kind of starts out, we learn trust, or what we think trust is, from people, and then we really learn trust from life and ourselves and experiences. And when we start to learn who we are, we can connect deeper with that sense. And I think, I wanted to come back around to that, so I'm glad you kind of brought that up, because I think it's important now to look at, okay, we kind of understand that there's this innate thing that you can cultivate where you can just trust to have positive expectation for your life, and you can carry that into your relationships. And that doesn't mean that you can ensure that you will never have another bad or painful relationship, because that's not true or possible. But it's a sense of, then we carry that trust into direct with a person. So, okay, this person, say they broke my trust. They lied or harmed me or wounded me in a way that they could have avoided with intention if they had just done that intention.
Sure.
So that's where you feel like breaking of trust is intentional, it's not an accidental, to truly do that. But now you can choose if you want to keep the person in your life or not, if you want to maintain the relationship or not. But then a lot of us tend to carry that fear with us regardless. So we can let that person go and we carry the fear on to the next. Or we keep that person because we do have a sense of hope, faith, reassurance that things can be positive in the long run for us. But we have that quiet, gnawing thing where we're constantly watching their decisions and trying to be hypervigilant in preventing trust from being broken. And it's almost like we attract, because then we create a relationship where there is no trust. So how can we have a trusting, loving relationship if we won't create that? So then that element of understanding that, okay, I choose to trust somebody who maybe has wronged me or is a new person, and I'm just going off of blank slate here, square one. There's always a possibility that that could be broken or hurt. But then it comes into that bigger sense of, even if that happens, even if I get hurt, I can still be a trusting, loving person.
Yeah.
And know that I will just no longer attract those relationships after a certain amount of time, and you really practice it and you keep cultivating that as yourself. If you keep putting that out, the partner that is not trustworthy, you will lose that person. They'll drop off. You'll cut them off. You'll be able to. You'll be strong. You'll trust yourself. You won't be in a panic state. Or the person is worthy of trust and you gave them the opportunity to show you that, and now you get to experience something really wonderful. So either way, you can still lean into that bigger sense of trust. That's a part of who you are. It's not an attitude or dependent on someone else's actions.
And I think that is a formula. I don't think that's
it seems terrifying,
and
that's
it's
but
real.
it's
I think
wonderful.
It's a real formula, though.
I think it is.
You add trust plus trust plus trust plus trust. It doesn't matter what happens in between. There's no that where she talked about that little you dig it out of you. If there's a moment in there where there's not a lovingness, where there's not a trust, where there's an agitation, where there's fear, you get those things out, and then you keep adding that, and then your end result will be trusting yourself, trusting others, trusting the world.
Having those relationships that are full of that, because you are full of that.
Yes.
You bring it to the table.
That's not this unattainable thing.
No.
That is real. It's 100% real.
It can be simple, and it doesn't have to be crazy, woo, we have to do all these things to get there. It's just simple stuff, and it's trusting in the big stuff, those really hard decisions that you have to make when you really learn yourself and have that level of understanding and trust in who you are and what your path is in life. You just kind of know, I can't ruin my life. it's not possible for me, I'm not going to do that because I know who I am, I know what my purpose is. I trust that I'll recover from bad decisions.
Yeah.
Because if you don't trust that you can do that, you tend to just not be able to do that. You squash your ability to do that. And when it comes to other relationships, I mean, there's a lot of evidence about the laws of attraction, and it can be brought into aspects of all different levels of faith and spirituality, and even in just science, there's laws of attraction that are happening. So I have a sense of understanding that if I put trusting, loving energy into my relationships, they will become a trusting, loving relationship. And if that person is incapable of that, the relationship will go away, and then guess what? You no longer have an unhealthy relationship, so you still have what you need, like you still have what you need.
Yeah, and I think that where we get caught up in those places is when we have a vision for something to look a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Having a positive expectation doesn't mean that we've mapped out and can completely control what it looks like.
Yeah, that goes back to the control thing, releasing that.
Absolutely.
Trust comes.
So it's like if you're painting a picture, but you're painting the picture with the values and the cultivations and the positive expectations. If you close your eyes and paint the picture, what comes out might not be what you thought was going to come out. But the trust is in the painting of the picture.
That it's going to be beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's your thing.
Absolutely. So I think that's pretty important. Because I think we get attached to, okay, we want this person, or we want this thing, or this job, or this, right? But really that letting go comes into play there, and then the trust comes in, and that's where the good stuff really lies, I think.
Release is a big part of all of it.
Yeah, surrender.
Just accepting and expecting positive outcomes. And I think we both have read a little bit of Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he mentions that like your mental rehearsals scenarios. Do you find yourself mentally rehearsing more negative outcomes or more positive outcomes? And if you even just practicing on our mental rehearsal, so that's developing a sense of trust of this is going to go well. This job interview, this conversation, this day when I wake up and have to go to work or run these errands, or this relationship, envisioning positive outcomes for ourselves, we can create them much more fluidly and more easily. And there's a really nice sense of ease that comes whenever you just I don't necessarily know what it's exactly going to be like, but I know it's going to go well. I can put that on there,
I love Marianne Williamson, and she wrote a book, Return to Love, and it's about the Course on Miracles.
Mm-hmm.
And she says that a miracle is just a shift in perception. And I think that's, when you set those positive expectations throughout the day, and let's say you wake up and you set them, and then throughout the day something does come about that disrupts that, it's then shifting the perception to remember, oh, wait a second, I said this was going to be a positive outcome, and then kind of moving past it in that way, and just consistently doing that. And
little things along the way will not go well,
well, whatever that means though. But sometimes a not well thing,
as expected maybe, or as hoped for, or whatever. But then there's another layer of the moments are not so definitive. We don't have to put so much weight on certain things, on certain outcomes, and just understanding the bigger picture, the greater outcome, not getting caught up on those little bitty moments along the way that sometimes we agonize over, and they just really don't affect the bigger picture at all.
And they grow longer.
Yeah, and then you're just upset, and
and we go past them.
Then you make more of them because you're not in.
So that's good. I like that. That worked, I think. So trusting is about the bigger picture ultimately, but I think it does start with human beings, because we are human and we're having this human experience. And I think it's hardest with humans oftentimes. It's a little bit easier to just kind of trust in the universe because it does always provide. But when we're faced with humans, I think that shows us just these mirrors of how we haven't quite worked through experiences in our lives that made us feel fear or sadness or suffering. And so working to trust the human is, in a sense, working on the smaller scale to protect this larger scale, really truth of the world, that it is trustworthy, and we are humans and we're part of that, and we're trustworthy, and we are just humans. And the mistakes and the little hiccups that we have along the way, I just think are just products of maybe the darker energies. That's always this little fight, right? The light and the dark. So this is the light, right? All this practice is about the light, practicing to keep that in our life, to practice to overcome those sorts of energies, and really move past that in a really graceful way.
Yeah, and if people haven't picked up on it yet, we're very much positive, like-minded people. We have positive expectations. We have a lot of trust, and it's working. I like it.
No, it works.
It's working.
That's what we're talking about.
That's what we're talking. We believe in this. It's just what we believe.
I don't believe in it. I know it.
It is. It is. It just is.
Is.
It's working. It's working too well for it to not be true.
Yeah, and this time, I think this time that we're in, still kind of coming into this new world. I don't know what this new world looks like with the coronavirus pandemic panning out, and that maybe there's this is all part of it too, and there's a way to really see this, even if you can't see the outcome, but trusting in that this is part.
But the other side of this, there's something where we can be growing and have better things if we trust.
If we just trust.
Well, I think that was really nice. So we're going to wrap it up there.
Please subscribe to our channel. That would really help us out. Share this information with anybody who could use it, or anybody that's just like-minded. And check out all our social media. We are on Instagram and Facebook. And I'm Sheena Dressel.
And I'm Lauren Garrison.
And we are MindFeelz.